Roman Reigns targets Jacob Fatu. Fatu's WWE future questioned. Backlash 2026 tension rising. Roman sends brutal warning. Reigns vs. Jacob Fatu heats up. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on all the latest news. What happens when Roman Reigns stops speaking like a champion protecting his position and starts speaking like someone deciding who even deserves to exist in the same space as him? And what does it really mean when a name like Jacob Fatu gets pulled into that kind of conversation, not as a threat, not as a rival, but as someone being questioned at the most basic level of belonging? Because that's where this whole thing begins, and honestly, it doesn't feel like normal WWE hype anymore. It feels like something simmering underneath everything else, something that's been waiting for the right moment to spill over. Roman Reigns sent a message to Jacob Fatu ahead of Backlash 2026, and the way it landed wasn't just loud, it was sharp in a way that made people rewind it twice just to be sure they heard it correctly. He didn't say "I'll beat you," he didn't say "you're next," he didn't even go for the usual dominance talk that we're used to hearing from him. He went deeper than that. He basically questioned whether Jacob Fatu even belongs in WWE at all. And the second that line dropped, you could almost feel the shift in how fans were processing it. Because that's not just rivalry language. That's not even personal beef in the usual sense. That's identity-level dismissal. That's someone looking at another man's entire presence in the company and saying, out loud, that it might not be valid. Now pause on that for a second, because that's heavy even by WWE standards. Roman Reigns is someone who has built his entire modern era around control. Control of timing, control of narrative, control of reactions. He doesn't usually waste energy unless he sees something worth addressing at a higher level. So when he singles out Jacob Fatu like this, it immediately raises questions. Is this intimidation? Is this confidence? Or is this recognition of something he feels he needs to shut down before it grows? And Jacob Fatu is not exactly a background character in this either. This is someone with a reputation that doesn't rely on flashy talk or long promos. He's more of a presence guy. The kind of wrestler who steps into a space and you feel it before anything even happens. There's a raw edge to him that doesn't need explanation, and that's exactly the kind of energy that tends to clash with Roman Reigns' calculated dominance. So when Roman says someone like that doesn't belong in WWE, it doesn't land as casual trash talk. It lands like a challenge to the entire idea of what Jacob Fatu represents. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because fans are split already. Some people hear Roman's words and immediately think this is just another layer of his head-of-the-table mindset. The same mindset that's been used to dismiss challengers, weaken confidence before matches, and set the tone before the bell even rings. From that angle, this is just Roman doing what Roman does, establishing psychological control before Backlash 2026. But there's another group watching this and thinking, hold on, why this specific wording? Why question belonging instead of ability? Because that shift in language matters. It suggests this isn't just about who wins a match, it's about who is even considered part of the same conversation. And that's where Jacob Fatu becomes even more interesting in this story. Because if you're Jacob Fatu, you don't just hear that and move on. Even if you don't respond immediately, even if you stay silent in public, that kind of statement sits in the background of everything you do. It follows you into training, into preparation, into every moment leading up to Backlash. And in wrestling, that kind of psychological weight can either break someone down or turn them into something more unpredictable. And unpredictability is the last thing Roman Reigns usually wants to deal with. Now imagine the build toward Backlash 2026 from here. Roman Reigns standing firm, still speaking like the final authority, still acting like he's already decided how everything is supposed to go. And Jacob Fatu on the other side of that, not necessarily matching the volume, but possibly matching something more dangerous, patience. Because silence in wrestling storylines is never empty. Silence usually means calculation. And that's where the tension really lives right now. Not in loud confrontations, not in staged chaos, but in the space between what was said and what hasn't been answered yet. Roman Reigns' message wasn't just about Jacob Fatu, it was about drawing a boundary. A psychological border that says this is where I stand, and you might not be allowed to cross it. But wrestling has a funny way of making those kinds of borders temporary. The more you try to define someone out of a space, the more they tend to push back just to prove they can exist in it. And fans know that pattern. They've seen it enough times to recognize when something is building toward a breaking point. What makes this even more layered is the timing. Backlash 2026 isn't just another event on the calendar. It's the kind of stage where statements become outcomes. Everything said before it gets tested under pressure, and everything said after it depends on what happens in that ring. So Roman Reigns is not just talking for hype here. Whether intentional or not, he's setting expectations for what he believes will happen when they finally collide. But here's where the uncertainty creeps in, and this is what makes people lean in closer to this storyline. What if he's wrong? What if Jacob Fatu is not just another challenger who reacts the way everyone expects? What if the dismissal itself becomes fuel instead of pressure? Because in wrestling, the moment someone says you don't belong, it doesn't always shrink the target. Sometimes it expands them. And Roman Reigns knows that better than almost anyone. Which is why this whole situation feels a little more deliberate than it first appears. Like he's either trying to crush something early or test whether it can survive his level of pressure. Either way, Jacob Fatu is now in a position where silence isn't neutral anymore. It means something. And when he does respond, whether it's with words or actions, it's going to shift the tone of this entire rivalry. And that's what makes this interesting going into Backlash 2026. It's not just about who wins or loses. It's about whether Roman Reigns' perception of control holds up when faced with someone who doesn't necessarily play by the same rhythm. Because Roman operates like someone who believes the story bends around him. Jacob Fatu operates more like someone who doesn't acknowledge the story at all and just steps through it. Those two philosophies don't just clash, they collide. And when they collide in WWE, especially on a stage like Backlash, things rarely stay clean. So now the question becomes less about disrespect and more about reality. Was Roman Reigns making a statement of truth, or was he trying to define a reality before it gets challenged? And if Jacob Fatu steps into that ring with even half the intensity fans expect, does that statement still hold up the same way it does right now? That's the part nobody can answer yet, and that's exactly why this is working. Because right now, all we have is Roman Reigns' words echoing forward, and Jacob Fatu's silence sitting right behind them like a countdown. And somewhere in the middle of that, Backlash 2026 is getting closer. So I want to throw it back to you watching this. When you hear Roman say Jacob Fatu doesn't belong in WWE, do you hear confidence, or do you hear a warning that he might already be preparing for something bigger than he's letting on? Drop your thoughts because this is one of those debates that's going to get louder the closer we get to Backlash. And if you're still here listening, seriously, I appreciate it. These are the kinds of storylines that are more fun when you break them down together instead of just watching them pass by. Thanks for spending your time here, and I'll catch you in the next one.